So I got asked to talk about me. I'm today's Japanese slang term. Wait, no, that's the wrong series. That's better. Today's useless information is my background as a scholar of Japanese. I grew up in not a rural area, but a pretty small city. Compared to Sydney, where I live now, it was very tiny. And as far as I'm aware, I didn't really have any real understanding of what Japanese was until I went to university. I'm sure I heard Japanese spoken somewhere, but I don't really have a recollection of it. Now keep in mind, am a huge nerd, so I played a lot of games. I had a connection to Japan. I remember coming home from school and watching Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z. I enjoyed my PlayStation. I played Dance Dance Revolution. I had a Tamagotchi. But just to give context, while I know I'm not like holding a cane and getting close to retirement or anything, the environment back when I was a kid was just really, really different. Japanese stuff often hid the fact that it was Japanese. I remember not knowing Power Rangers was Japanese until I was an adult. And even if you did watch Japanese media, it was hard to get it in Japanese. It was always dubbed. So there wasn't really much of a chance for exposure, especially again in a smaller area. When I went to uni though, we were required to take 2 years of a language. And I'd taken some Spanish in high school, and no shade to Spanish, but I didn't love it. I had gone to Mexico and I really enjoyed talking with people in Spanish, but the language itself didn't excite me that much. So I decided to try something completely out of the normal and took Japanese. So I didn't go to school to learn Japanese initially. That was not my primary major. And I didn't think I'd study Japanese for more than 2 years, but I immediately just fell in love with it. Indeed, I went to the classroom incredibly ignorant. I didn't even know that hiragana, katakana, and kanji were a thing. And I know that sounds ridiculous now. When I teach, every student kind of comes with that background knowledge. But honestly, on the first day of class, first semester of uni, first year, I was not the only person that kind of had a, oh gosh, what have I gotten myself into face when they introduced what we'd be having to do. That said, I immediately fell in love with the language, not only just because it was really different, but I felt a clear sense of accomplishment. It was hard, it took struggle, but I could see myself improving kind of right before my eyes. It felt like I was actually developing a skill immediately. So while I didn't abandon my first major or anything, which was in literature and creative writing, I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to write books, and ironically now I have, although it's all nonfiction instead, I did decide to make Japanese my minor. I enjoyed it that much. And getting a minor involves studying abroad, and I spent a semester at Nanzan University and just loved it. That was when I realized I wasn't just interested in the Japanese language, I was interested in Japan itself, Japanese people. Again, different time. Now I have a lot of students that have been to Japan multiple times before they even enter my classroom, but that was rare back then. I decided to double major and came back and finished that, and I did quite well. I was awarded one of the 2 Japanese Studies Awards by the school at the end of the year, and I was lucky enough to get hired by the JET program to go and teach in Japan. I thought that'd be a really fun thing to do. I felt really passionate about language learning at the time, and I thought I would like to become a language teacher. So I spent 3 years on the JET program, and I really, really liked it. I'm not going to pretend everything was like bright, delightful roses or anything like that, but I had a really, really great experience overall. I really appreciate all the people that I worked with. I appreciated my students. Just be honest, it was not like the strongest school. We had a lot of kids that did not care about English at all. I'd say the majority didn't. But I don't know if I'm phrasing this correctly, but I don't think being in Japan for 3 years suddenly turned me into an adult, but I definitely think that it helped me realize what kind of person I want to be and set me on the path to adulthood, if that makes sense. While I was in Japan, I continued my Japanese study. I did at least an hour of study a day. Sometimes this was at work. Anyone who's done the JET program knows that you do have some downtime, but also when I got home on the weekends. And I had a teacher that I saw twice a week. And that was very, very helpful because I'd gone from, a classroom setting to more of a free study kind of thing. And having someone to touch base with regularly to make sure I was on the right track was very, very helpful. I also found it very, very helpful to set goals, and that was the JLPT. And I tried to do some kind of independent study as well. One of the things that I really am glad I did is that every day I made a commitment to learn 2 new words. Because I was living in Japan and I had a lot of chance to speak with people all the time, I noticed regularly gaps in what I wanted to say. So I would note that, and then I would learn those words that I needed immediately, which really was motivating because I was like, okay, I can never have this issue again. I will know the words I need. And I had a notebook, I would write the word in kanji, write the English translation, fill out the rest of the line, writing it over and over. And in the line below, I would use it in sentences. Simple ones, but I would use it so it went from an abstract word into something more practical. All that combined was really helpful. And after 2 years in Japan, so 6 years in total, I sat N2 and I got a really, really good mark. So I was kind of over-prepared. As a result, my teacher pushed me to go and take N1, and I sat that at my 3rd year on the JET program, my final year, and I was lucky enough to pass it on my first attempt. Not get an amazing score. I don't brag about my score, but I did pass it, and I told myself I'd take it again and get a better score, and I never did because it cost money, and I don't have the time. So all in all, 7 years to get a document saying I'm really good at Japanese, which is not the fastest I've heard, but I'm pretty happy with it and pretty proud of it. That said, while I really did enjoy JET and I really did enjoy living in Japan, I also learned very much that I didn't want to teach adolescents for the rest of my life. And so I spent some time thinking about how I could get a job teaching adults that wasn't just, like Aeon or something like that, like a full-time kind of career. And what I kind of settled on was going to university and getting a degree so that I could teach at a university. I felt that would be not only just, a better paying, more secure job, but one that would fit my interests more. So I spent some time looking at universities around the world, and I found that there were a number of universities in Australia that not only had Japanese programs and a linguistics program, but a Japanese linguistics program. So I applied, I was able to get into Monash University, and my initial plan was to do a master's thesis on how Japanese learners of English learned how to edit their own English and what the strengths and weaknesses of their approaches would be. And that was very, very at home in the normal kind of research that was being done there. A lot of people there were looking on like the motivations of study abroad people, how learners negotiated their identity as they were going through classrooms, things like that. Things were very kind of classroom focused. But in the middle of my master's degree, I attended a seminar series that was being held at the university where a number of sociolinguists were talking. And I immediately realized, this is what I want to do. This is actually what I am more interested in. And so while my master's coursework was all still very much kind of in the applied linguistics space, some of the projects I started to design for final papers, etc., were drawing on sociolinguistics. And indeed, my master's thesis was looking at the use of katakana to represent the speech of non-native Japanese speakers in Japanese comics and trying to understand what the purpose of that is. And that resulted in first ever real published paper I had, which came out during my master's degree. This kind of threw a lot of my supervisors for a loop, but they still encouraged me to take this on and develop it for a PhD. So for my PhD, I expanded to go beyond just language learners and looked at the variation in the use of Japanese script throughout a number of Japanese manga series, trying to figure out why Japanese people use, as I've talked about in this video, hiragana when they're supposed to use kanji, etc. And that stood as the primary research interest I had for the next few years. My first big publication was on this, and that came out in the Journal of Sociolinguistics, which is one of the best in my field. So that was really a huge motivating success, especially right after I finished my PhD. That said, post-PhD was a little rough. The job market in academia, you may have heard, is bad, and it is. After I finished my PhD, I spent 2 years looking for a job, and I know if any of you have a background in academia, you're going to think, 2 years, that's it? That's really fast. Yeah, it was. I know I shouldn't be complaining about 2 years, but it was rough. Fortunately, I was working more or less full-time. I had a number of jobs at a number of universities, both teaching and coordinating courses, which are experiences I'm very, very thankful. I don't think I would have got this job if I didn't have that kind of background, not only teaching into, but running classes in Japanese language, linguistics, and various other things. But it was really discouraging. I was applying to, 20 to 30 jobs a year. And again, if you're not familiar with academic jobs, I know that doesn't sound like a huge amount, but when you're working full-time, academic job applications are a massive undertaking. Depending on the country you're applying to and the university, they can go from anything from just sending your CV, which is very easy, to massive time-consuming documents. For instance, in Australia, you often have to write a document that's 10 plus pages responding to a number of questions they ask you. In America, that's not usually necessary, but some universities require you to record yourself teaching and send an hour plus video, as well as give a lengthy statement on your philosophy towards teaching. For some of the universities I applied to in America, I had to send an entire original syllabus for a unit, which took weeks to prepare. For Japanese universities especially, that was miserable because not only do they have a custom resume that you have to fill out, you can't just send your normal CV. They require a bunch of stuff one had me print off, not email, not PDF, print off my entire PhD thesis. This entire thing and mail it to them, as well as they regularly required a photograph, which I don't understand how that's even legal, much less relevant. I get a lot of comments making fun of my hairline and stuff, and that's fine. You can do that. That's okay. But the fact that my hair is receding has nothing to do with my ability to be a professor of Japanese. Why do you need my photo? I'm not applying to be a model. I just want to teach. I just want to research. I wasn't taking an approach of I will only teach at the best universities. I was applying to the University of Podunk McNowhere, and sometimes I wouldn't even get a reply. And again, this is not the only story you'll hear of someone having trouble finding an academic job, but given that, I had some good publications, I'd done really well, my PhD thesis came back with a recommendation for no revisions from both reviewers, which was really rare, it was discouraging. So I applied, and right when I was kind of giving up and starting to apply for things outside of academia, I was able to get a position at Macquarie University, which is where I work now. So this kind of brings me to the final thing, which is, what do I do at my job? Being an academic working at a university involves a number of things. One of the most obvious is I teach Japanese. I run our introductory 1 and 2 courses, and I've designed them, as well as the textbook that we use. It's free online if you want to have a look. I think it's pretty good. But beyond that, I also have to do, obviously, a bunch of admin, and then I have to research. That's really the key thing. There are a lot of people that can teach Japanese, but you get a PhD because of research, right? I don't go up and be like, hello, I'm good at Japanese, PhD please, and they go, okay, here you go. A big part of my job is producing new findings that help us better understand languages, cultures, peoples, etc. Really, I kind of built on my previous research involving Japanese script, but lately I've been spreading out more and more into work on Japanese subcultures, Japanese wordplay, as well as using often Japan as a key analysis point, looking at how subcultures spread around the world, especially through the Asia-Pacific region. I also, of course, do these kind of videos as part of just extra stuff. I don't do this at work, it's all after, because when I was learning Japanese, I felt it was really important to have high quality, although I don't know if I'm making high quality stuff, but I was always really delighted to see free materials online that I thought people would put a lot of effort into, and I kind of want to pay that forward. And also I find it fun. On that, I've also recently become chair of the discipline that I'm in, Discipline of Global Cultures and Languages, and that involves a lot of work supporting my team, supporting the university and the school that we work within, and trying to keep just everything running. So all in all, while I would say that I very much enjoy my job and what I do note that getting a job in academia is hard, and I think it's honestly only getting harder. I'm really committed to education and teaching. I think one of the best things you could do is actually get into government and really push for better funding for not just universities, but schools, stuff like TAFE and training, and just making sure that we have investment and care for the importance of education and training for young people. But if you are really interested in it, if you are really interested in doing a PhD, there are a lot of skills you can get in there. But my number one recommendation, really nowadays especially, that when you start your program, think about what you want to do that is potentially outside of academia, because there is a chance that the jobs just won't be here. When I was about to give up, for instance, I began applying to Amazon Japan because they were actually looking for sociolinguists because they wanted people, I believe, to do stuff with Japanese dialects for things like Alexa. So there are a lot of positions out there. And indeed, if you do a PhD, if you do a master's, you will develop a number of skills in research, data analysis, public speaking, presentations, working with other people, designing and navigating effective and ethical projects that are very applicable to a number of industries and businesses. So the one warning I'd say is don't go into academia, don't go do a master's and PhD thinking I will absolutely be working in a university in a few years. Think about the skills that you're going to be developing and a number of things you could hopefully do with them. Anyway, that's me. I was asked to talk about it, and so I am. Hope it was interesting, but I've already heard all this stuff, so I'm kind of done talking about it. Best of luck for your Japanese studies, of course, or your study of any language, whatever it is, and I'll see you in the next video.